And now I'm happy once again to introduce today's presentation called Beyond Finger Walks, Multi-Sensory Adventures for Mind, Body, and Spirit. Today, we have author, presenter, Maia Scott with us. And on the screen, you will see a picture that is featuring Maia and her guide dog, Gleam, as they're sitting together in the center of a labyrinth. So we have this product that is featuring now. What I have up on the screen is the Finger Walks replacement kit. It is for $35.65. It is federal quota eligible, free matter for the blind. There is the catalog number that's available. So in today's presentation, we are going to unpack Finger Walks and review Labyrinth Basics. We are going to list at least 5 multisensory activities using finger labyrinths. This is going to be great application for you to be able to take this and apply it to students, as well as at least 4 ways to adapt these fun activities with students of all abilities. We want to let you know that we experienced a little bit of a hiccup with our planning of this webinar. All of our content has been designed for a 90-minute window, but we have a 60-minute time restraint for us today. So I wanted to let you know that the first 3 objectives, we will be very careful, and you will get all of that content. It'll then take us up to about the top of the hour. If you are able to stay with us after 3 o'clock, we would love to have you join us, continue to stay on so that you can also learn how to draw a very basic finger labyrinth pattern. So before we get started, I just want to give some food for thought. The expanded core curriculum drives everything that we do as vision educators. And I have listed on the slide all 9 categories of the expanded core: compensatory access, sensory efficiency, assistive technology, orientation mobility, independent living, social interaction, recreation and leisure, career education, and self-determination. The reason that 2 of them are colored and highlighted is because I'd love for you to be able to think about how this presentation, the application of using this amazing product, falls in with compensatory access instruction that we provide, but also that recreation and leisure, which we can often struggle to have enough ideas to know how to pass along to students to give them enough activities to practice that skill. So some things to think about. And while we transition to getting ready for Maia, we have one last poll that we're going to launch for you. Okay, so please share who you want to introduce this product to. You may have come and seated with us today with a student in mind. We would love to know who you are interested in using this product with. You can choose multiple answers for this. We would love for you to share with us who you would love to use it for. And so we will go ahead and stop the polling at this time. We realize only about 54% have voted, but we want to be able to share with you what it is that we have. And so this also helps you, Maia, to know that people want to use this product with every single category that we mentioned, whether preschool children, elementary students, middle school, high school, students with intellectual challenges, adult learners, and I love this, and I think you will too, Maia, even our participants themselves really are interested in this. So that kind of gives you an idea of who's also in the audience today.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I'm going to get your PowerPoint. Maia, it is all yours.
I'm so excited to just completely geek out on all sorts of fun things to do with labyrinths with you guys today. Let me just escape here. Let me see. Haha, okay. Just minor adjustment with magnification. Beautiful. So the first objective we're going to explore is just to unpack and review a little bit about labyrinths and unpack finger walks, show you guys what the full set looks like, so you can see all the possibilities and fun things going on. So just some labyrinth basics that you might remember from the previous webinar is that a labyrinth is often used as a tool for meditation, also just to quiet your mind, body and spirit. In many cultures, they represent stories of creation and the journey of life. There's a lot of fun symbolism that can be learned about or even made up in exploring labyrinths. For those of you guys who haven't seen a labyrinth before, a spiral is often considered the most basic form of a labyrinth. So if you can imagine a spiral winding back in and around itself and taking twists and turns and whatnot, you will probably have an image of a labyrinth. They often have one way in, you take the same way out. So there's no tricks or dead ends. The idea of a labyrinth is to help you find your way and not lose your way. So it's a low risk, high reward kind of exploration through space, which I love about them very much. So there's a lot of benefits to walking labyrinths in addition to just being fun. There's some great right brain, left brain connections. It helps narrow your focus. So if you have students who have trouble concentrating, this is a great tool prior to lessons. It's also a great fidget too at the same time. It can help reduce stress. I know some of my students, when I say homework, they go, ah! Unlocking creativity, kind of by staying in the lines, it gives you that choice. Do you want to go out of them? I feel a sense of community walking together at the same time. And I love that it helps me really be in the present and not worry about things. There's also just a sense of non-judgment because there's no wrong way to walk it. And it also helps kind of open channels for problem solving because you empty that space that has all your mind clutter in it, and there's room for new things to come in. And just for fun, over on the side, I have an image that I drew of a heart labyrinth. So they're very fun to make art with as well. So I just wanted to give a little audio on that. So let's unpack finger walks. So inside the envelope, you get a guidebook that contains all sorts of information about how to walk a labyrinth, what they're good for, etc. Plus descriptions of each of the labyrinths. There's 16 tactile images that cross time and culture and complexity. So there's something for just about everybody at a variety of levels. From Indigenous American cultures, Peru, modern makers from the London Underground, and of course, ancient symbolism as well. So there's finger walks for you. It's, I think it's something that can live on your shelf for a long time, but I'm a little biased because I proposed it, and I think it's something that doesn't just last through a certain grade. You can keep on your bookshelf and have fun with it for many years. So let's go through some multisensory activities using finger labyrinths. So the basic walk, we kind of talked about that a little bit, just using your finger. There's a lot of ways you can walk. Again, you can use the same labyrinth for years and have totally different experiences depending on how you approach the process. So starting with 3 deep breaths is a great way to just ground. A favorite one among avid labyrinth walkers is the 3 R's. And nope, this is not reading, writing, and arithmetic in this case. We're talking about releasing as you get to the center, receiving at the center, which doesn't always happen in that moment. It might take 2 weeks. And then returning with your newfound information or your newfound sense of peace. You can start by asking a question and just kind of opening space to find answers. thinking about someone important. Maybe if you're studying somebody in culture, or you're doing women's history, or your student is grieving a loved one, you could take a walk to honor that person or that culture. Um, I love to walk in gratitude and remembrance because that always lifts my spirit, especially these days. And I kind of mentioned already about culture. Um, leaving all your heavy things behind. It's a great way to, again, just be in the moment. Um, my friend had this great expression about you have your home shoes and your school shoes or your work shoes. And when you go home, you take the outside shoes off and you leave them. So the idea of leaving things behind before you get in the labyrinth is a nice way to let go for a moment. And it's also, since there's no wrong way to walk, you can make it to the center. What is it? What does it look like if you reach your goals? What does it look like if you make it to that thing that you want to do, or that place you want to be? And of course, just simply being in peace, just finding quiet for a moment and rebooting. So just kind of enhancing the walk again, using that same labyrinth pattern again for the first time over and over again. The fun thing to do is you can also walk with your less dominant hand. I love doing that. Again, it's that a total new twist on that right brain, left brain. Uh, walk with a different finger. You can walk with your eyes even. Turn the labyrinth a different direction. If you get used to it, turn it on its side and enter from your less dominant side. You can walk with a closed pen or a stylus. Maybe you went on a nature walk and you found a little shell on the beach and you want to remember that experience. You can walk with that little piece of shell. And you can also walk faster or slower. And you can also walk in silence or with music or a soundscape. There's a little picture over here of really random weird stuff that's kind of fun to think about walking with a labyrinth, including Q-tips and crystals and sticks. And there's even a fuse. If you think you're going to blow a fuse, it's a good thing to walk a labyrinth. So let's go explore labyrinths as a story structure. And the fun thing, the simplest thing is labyrinth like stories, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And also, again, there's so much symbolism and just the idea of all the twists and turns. I know my favorite stories have twists and turns and unexpected things that happen. And in cultures such as the tribes of the Southwest indigenous people, the labyrinth, there's a labyrinth pattern, the man in the maze, that represents a story of creation. And so it, just the within cultures and within the image and the symbolism itself, there's so much to latch onto to bolster existing stories and the creation of your own. As with many situations in life, the labyrinth leads you to think you will get your goal quickly. And then you're kind of spun around in different directions before you actually get there. I mean, how often has that happened? I mean, for me, it's like the story of my life and kind of what attracted me to walking the labyrinth in the first place. And like like a story, a labyrinth invites you to kind of leave your normal behind and go exploring in different ways and different places inside your mind or wherever you want to go. So let's play with a little bit of story with an example here. I just used some examples from the refill collection, the 4 images that Amy talked about early on. And the classical labyrinth, for example, is kind of a fun one to think about. Ariadne's thread and the Minotaur and Theseus. And what if you have, in the myth, we see the Minotaur as this bad guy that the hero slays. But, maybe the Minotaur is not a bad guy. Maybe all those sacrifices are hiding out in the back in a hippie commune. What if you write a story, or look at the labyrinth and the Minotaur in it deeper. Maybe he's just misunderstood, as many of us are. And the hero's journey, for example, as we see in Harry Potter and Star Wars and all those coming of age stories where they go through trials and tribulations and they learn something amazing about themselves and their world, and they come back stronger and bolder than ever. So, just another thing too is you could take your student on a journey. I'm looking at this bottom one here, this Baltic labyrinth pattern. What if you go through a portal and you go on a path and you discover in a glade a magic box that has you happen to have a key in your pocket, and you open it and you find something. So you can take your students on journeys as well as use the labyrinths as a tool or a catalyst for sparking imagination, and also kind of as a framework for looking at existing stories. All right. So music and sound is so important to me in my world, and just finding community and kind of the vibrations of relaxing and celebrating. So, just relaxing music itself that you could find on YouTube or Spotify or Pandora, or whatever you seek out for your musical selections, to find music that doesn't have lyrics. Sometimes words that we understand can, trigger ideas and stories in our head. And if we're trying to focus something else, having music without words, such as Wah or Duder or 2002 or Aeolia, those are some good ones. The 432 hertz is a pretty powerful attunement that I think the ancient Egyptians used. It creates greater harmony and brightness and greater clarity, which who doesn't want that when they're learning or exploring? And classical music certainly boosts mood and productivity. It's has its own rhythm. It's not a pulsing bass beat, oomph, 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 something a little softer. Sounds of nature are fantastic. If you were to go out into a rainforest with all of its parts in place, it contains all of the harmonies and all of the frequencies that we need to be healthy. So nature sounds can help with that. And white noise is also great for concentration and for blocking out sound clutter from the experience. So let's explore the kind of voice. If you don't have a playlist, you always got this box in here. And if that voice box doesn't work, you also got things around us in our bodies. So positive words or mantras. I am here, I am open, I am present, I am ready. That can certainly help set a student up for success in their class. Vocal toning, including and long vowels and other vocal kind of explorations are fun. You could sing your way through a labyrinth, drum or tap out a heartbeat. Something that we all have is a heartbeat. It's a rhythm that most of us can relate to. Even sometimes we have a little syncopation in our heartbeat. And you can even create a labyrinth sound bath with even like easy to play instruments that we'll kind of look at next. Some of my favorites I'm sharing here, including tingshaws, a shanty chime, and a singing bowl. So, I love those sounds. They always make me feel good. So if you want to go into sensory play, there's a lot more than you can that you can do with the labyrinth to just make the walk a completely different multi-sensory experience. I explored kind of the idea of submerging the labyrinth into a tray full of warm water. So nice for cold hands or arthritis, for just finding that soothing sensation. If there's no sensory issues, just putting a drop of lavender in that water can be really, really refreshing and soothing. You could lay a soft scarf or something over it so that you feel the shape of the labyrinth through a different texture. And then you can lay down with a labyrinth on your belly and just kind of walk it on yourself and feel the pattern gently traced out on your own body. And just thinking about the small intestines are kind of a labyrinth in their own right. And the way our body works is very labyrinthian. We have a labyrinth in our ear. So you could also submerge it into a tub of sand or balls or dried beans, anything like that. It's kind of fun to sink your fingers in there and try to find the entrance and work your way through. And so here's an example of playing with one in sand. And all these things that I'm showing are just things that can be found like in the dollar store, oftentimes at home, in the garage, out on a nature walk. I collected this sand from a little lake nearby. I recommend softer sand, finer sand like you can get at the dollar store. And here I'm just, the labyrinth is underneath. And as my fingers are tracing the labyrinth from underneath the sand, it's showing up kind of a groove. Imagine those gophers going through underneath your yard, making those trails. That's kind of what it looks like. So then another fun thing to do too, I love model magic clay or any kind of modeling clay. You can put a ball of clay, squish a ball of clay together and make it into a pancake and take impressions of a piece of one of the labyrinth patterns. In this case, I'm taking an impression of a flower type shape in the middle of a labyrinth, the Chartres labyrinth. And when you peel it up, it creates kind of a reverse tactile impression of the piece of the labyrinth. It's kind of a fun way to find details and understand details of the labyrinth. And to me, art and craft is almost its own sensory play. And I feel like the labyrinth itself is a work of art. So putting all these things together, creating rubbings are really fun. We'll get there in a moment. We'll show you one. Using small objects to create kind of a mosaic as you work your way in. And using sand or, with colored sand and whatnot, just kind of exploring the idea of the modification of the Tibetan sand mandala and kind of exploring this slow creation process and then having to let go of it is kind of a powerful lesson. Let's see. With washable tempera paint, washable tempera paint's really fun to roll out onto the top of your labyrinth image very gently and press paper on top. And you can do very basic mono prints with that process. And I love this process, walking the labyrinth with one hand while drawing it with the other, with your, and it can be totally done eyes free. So you're just getting this kinesthetic experience of mirroring. And the other fun thing to do too is to just try to recreate a labyrinth pattern using wiki sticks or your tactile artboard, if not with a thick marker. And there's no wrong way to walk a labyrinth, and there's no wrong way to create one. Be open-ended with it. It could be a very abstract idea of the labyrinth. What does it feel like to walk it? Which shape is it? There's lots of different elements of labyrinth recreation that you can go with in that process.
And two, just as a reminder, stay with us towards the end so that you can learn how to create one of your own. So maybe be looking around you right now to see if you have a piece of paper that's just a scrap piece of paper available and a pen so that you can do that as well with us here shortly.
Yes, or lots of buttons or Q-tips. So here's an example of just a rubbing. I like to use what I call naked crayons. So if you have the paper off, or I have these righty lefty crayons or those crayon balls, and just putting a piece of paper over your labyrinth image and rubbing in one direction with the crayon to pick up the pattern from underneath. It also makes a really cool brrr sound as you rub. And again, there's no wrong way. It's just a fun exploration of pattern, changing the position of the labyrinth, adding new colors. This is also a really neat way to create wrapping paper for the holidays, or maybe you're working on another art process. You can use this as a background, watercolor resist and paint over it and pick up the patterns. This is a great starting place for a lot of creative play.
And I love that you made that suggestion, Maya, about even making, wrapping paper and getting large piece of paper and doing the rubbing. So, if our participants out there have this product already, that's awesome. And they can actually put that into, play now as a really neat idea just at this time for the holidays.
Yes, indeed. It's a fun process. Making wrapping paper is really fun too. So the gift is outside as well as inside. And here's an example of the kind of mosaic idea. In my case, I'm using little tiny stones and crystals. You could also use Cheerios or beans, pretty much anything you have tiny bits of around the house, confettis, sequins. And it's a very extensive meditative process. In my case, I found myself, sometimes putting the pieces, in a different part of the path, and it just looks really beautiful at the end once it's done. Some of our labyrinths in this kit have kind of lower walls, but if you have the bigger kit, there's different sized walls, different sized tactile elements that are easier and harder to put things around tactily. So let's play a little bit with some ways of adapting labyrinth activities. And some of these are just fun activities on their own as well. So the first one that is kind of fun. Say you have a student who is just kind of daunted by the whole thing and just likes feeling it. A great way to introduce the labyrinth itself, and also kind of a fun way to learn about mapping and whatnot, is to kind of play a game of show me, sort of a Where's Waldo in the labyrinth world. Show me a circle. The whole thing is a circle. Show me the entrance. Can you go around the edge and find it? Show me the center. Show me a bumpy edge. So tactily, there's little grooves all the way around the outside of this circle called lunations. So you can find those. Show me a flower. Show me bow tie shapes. So there's different kind of elements of the labyrinth that you can play with. And then you could even ask them, like, what does that remind you? What could those bow tie shapes be? Where do you think that flower grew? The entrance is down at the bottom. In your case, where do you think it would be fun to enter from? What if you enter from the top? So it's just a fun way to ask questions and kind of get to know the anatomy of a labyrinth.
And I love that, Maya, because, at the beginning we were talking about thinking of how to generalize this activities that you're sharing with us to the expanded core curriculum. And whereas so many things that you shared really fell in with that recreation and leisure component, these ideas here really, to me, speak loudly with the compensatory access, the pre-Braille skills. And what I can see is how this example of what you have just described and shown here are things that can be done with a preschool student, with the shape identification and just what the texture feels like, but it grows into, more complex for learners who are a little bit more advanced. It can also be a Braille warm-up activity to get their fingers ready for reading something else. So I love that application.
Beautiful. And another adaptation that kind of falls into the line of storytelling as well as the mosaic is just to go on a treasure hunt. This is a Baltic style labyrinth, which means it's one of the few styles that actually has two paths. It has a very short path out. So you can have really low risk, high reward experiences here because you get to come out or go in very fast. And in this case, I dropped some treasures along the way, and you can follow the path and pick up the treasures as you go. Maybe you put treats in there that can be eaten along the way, or sparkles, something that your student really enjoys or loves. Or maybe the items can be collected and used to tell a story. And then another adaptation. I have a lot of students who are nonverbal, but make very great sounds, and also don't necessarily write in full sentences. So I mentioned about using sounds and singing to follow a labyrinth. So just as an example, I'm going to tone this classical labyrinth here that has 7 circles to the middle. So I'm going to tone my way to the middle. And just for fun, if you want to play along, close your eyes and see if you can figure out where I am in the labyrinth, or if you want to follow along and see if you can follow where I am, you can do that as well. So this is just really fun and joyful, and freeing your voice is also a powerful confidence building tool in my book. It certainly has for me. So here we go. Oh, woo! Oop. Oh, do 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 do. Whoop. Ha 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 ha. Whoop. Hey. Shh. I made it. So there's this kind of an example of playing with sound as you walk the path. And you could do it with animal sounds, or what does a city sound like? What if you're walking down the streets of your city on your way to your favorite place, and you walk that labyrinth, that route through, and all the sounds that you'd hear along the way? What if you're in a jungle and you're hearing all the animals? What if you're floating through the ocean down below, like in Jules Verne's classic story, and experiencing all the things below the surface? So again, this is all these things are just like seeds, and yes, and where do you go from here? So I hope that you guys are just going, oh, I could do this, I could do that. And I would love for you to share them in chat as you go, so we can all kind of yes and off each other from these.
I think that's a great suggestion. So really encourage people to maybe just start putting in that chat window your ideas. I have to stop and say what I absolutely love that you just talked about, Maya, and that was you made the link of a labyrinth, this one particularly, with a literature story. and with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I love how you just kind of made that, you paired this, you aligned it, you made it a way of something very recreational that also fit with something that was core curriculum. So I couldn't let that pass by. I wanted to tell you that. I loved that.
That's the beautiful thing to me about labyrinths. But then again, I'm just like total, if anything can sit still long enough, maybe I'll try to make a labyrinth out it or on it, and they're just super fun as a creative constraint. But they're just, to me, there's just kind of an endless myriad of uses and possibilities for playing with them and meditating with them. And the big one that I think is important and that is going to lead into how to draw a basic one is just also finding simpler forms and different forms of labyrinths that your students might relate to. For instance, someone has carved a labyrinth, a 3-circuit labyrinth, into some clay. So you walk the squishy parts of the clay. And that was actually, I found that on a wonderful facilitator who works with Montessori and labyrinths, Beth Langley from Lasting Labyrinths. And another thought too is to make the labyrinth that is just the what we call the Ariadne's thread. So it's the path rather than going between the walls. In all the cases so far, we've gone between the walls. So you could bump into either side. In this case, you're actually walking on the puffy cotton balls. And this was made in a workshop led by another awesome creative person, Lisa Moriarty. And then from the same workshop, here's one that's made out of chocolate kisses. Talk about a multi-sensory experience of smelling that chocolate. And there's this wonderful facilitator who works with kids and does this chocolate mindfulness. Janice Lewis has this peace club, and they spend 20 minutes unpacking a piece of chocolate. So in this case, there's probably too much chocolate, for one sitting, but just making a labyrinth out of something that is really unexpected can really engage a student. And so,
wow, we have to, you know what? We are doing great with time. We still have 15 minutes left. We misjudged our time, but it's a pleasant surprise. So at this time, if you have that piece of paper by you and a pen, grab it. You will so want to follow along with this little mini lesson that Maya is going to share with us so that we can create our own.
Okay, this is super fun, and we're going to learn how to draw a 3-circuit labyrinth. And the fun thing about a lot of labyrinths, especially the kind of classical style ones, is that they start with a simple seed pattern. So if you know how to draw the seed pattern, and if you're familiar with playing connect the dots, then you've got this made in the shade. So let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can create a 3-circuit labyrinth. So the first thing you're going to want to do is start at maybe like a third up from the top of your paper. So you don't want to start it right in the middle like this is. You want it to be a little bit down lower, because when we build the labyrinth, it's going to go up more than down. And you're going to start by making a plus sign.
Maya,
yes.
Did you say a simple C, Charlie, or a simple seed like you planted?
Seed. Thank you for clarifying that. A seed like you grow a tree from. So SEED. And so we're going to start with a plus sign. I suggest like 2 to 3 inches across. So a line going down and then a little line going across it to make a plus sign. Again, about a third of the way up on your paper, 2/3 of the way down. And then put a dot in the corner of each of the quadrants of the plus sign, so it kind of becomes a square. And once you have those dots in place, now we get to play connect the dots. So in this image, you'll see a chance to create a little arch, a rainbow, from the top of your plus sign to the top, one of your top dots. For this sake, you can go from the top of your plus sign and make a little arch over to the top right dot. I like to call them rainbows because if you cut the top of the labyrinth off, it looks like a rainbow. So then we have the chance to do the same thing over again. In this case, you're going to start with the top left dot, and you're going to make a rainbow, an arch over the top of the first arch that you did, and you're going to connect it to the right arm of your plus sign. And you can see it's starting to grow, and here we go. So now we're going to start with the left arm of your plus sign and sweep over the top, making your rainbow and connecting to the bottom right dot. So the object is that by the end of this, everything, every edge of the plus and every dot is going to have an arch, a rainbow connected to it. And finally, we go to that bottom left dot and we go up, 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 all the way around and connect to the bottom of that plus. And if you did all of these connections, then you will have a 3-circuit labyrinth. And once you've got that and you find that easy, it's pretty easy to go online and you can search how to draw a 7-circuit finger labyrinth. And there's all sorts of YouTube videos and worksheets such as this to invite you to try drawing a 7-circuit. And so the difference is, remember how we made the plus sign with the 4 dots? For a 7-circuit, you include L's or smiles in each quadrant as well. So you're connecting like twice as many things. So you're connecting dots to smiles and smiles to pluses and whatnot. So go look that up if you want more. And the other fun thing to just to note is that you can make a labyrinth pretty much out of anything and anywhere. Again, here's a labyrinth that is very popular at Land's End on the beach, on a bluff in San Francisco overlooking the headlands, that someone has made out of rocks, and the whole community works together to maintain. And then on the left, there's just a picture of like goji berries and cashews and paper clips and Q-tips and marbles and pebbles that you can just create a labyrinth on your tabletop just for the sake of making one. I find that making a labyrinth is a meditative process, just like walking one. And my favorite my favorite phrase that I really learned about when I started walking labyrinths is that the journey is the reward. And so enjoy it. And I thank you so much and would love to learn if there's any questions or blanks that need to be filled in.
I think that's great. I love all of these ideas, Maya, that you gave to us today. And this would, you know what, I'm pleasantly surprised we have time remaining. We would love to know if you have any certain questions that maybe Maya might be able to clarify even a little bit more. So
there was a simple question that I'll grab that was in the chat is, perfect. Do you know if the labyrinths are wide? They look pretty narrow which is great for Braille readers. Do you know if there's any thoughts of making ones with wider channels to ease into the narrower ones?
Beautiful question. That goes right along with creating those more simplified labyrinths. And also in the kit, you'll find that there are some labyrinths that have wider paths and some that have narrower paths as you explore them as well. For example, there's a Ghent labyrinth that's really twisty, turny, and asymmetrical that has pretty narrow paths. And the classical one is a little bit wider. There's even one from the London Underground that alternates between wide and narrow paths. It starts out wide on the outside and it goes narrower. So yes, yes, yes. And again, of course, finger walks is great because you can sanitize it and reuse it and whatnot. But another fun thing about labyrinths, and I think you mentioned, Leanne, in your experience, you've made them for your students, right?
With hot glue.
With hot glue. And so you got hot glue and wiki sticks and string. And so if you learn that 7-circuit labyrinth or a chakra vayu that has a spiral in the middle, there's loads of seeds out there on the internet that you can create wide or narrow labyrinths to meet the needs of pretty much every student that you can envision.
Well, and one of the things too, Maya, that had popped into the chat that I really liked, I hadn't thought about, another APH product is using the quick draw paper that we have. That would be something that a teacher could use in order to create their own and give to the students. So I love that there. There are some, and some people, that are mentioning hot glue. You had mentioned that, Leanne. Someone else had mentioned about puffy paint.
Yes.
In there, that's great.
Glitter
So this
glue.
is interesting for us to think about as well, is wondering if we could get some labyrinth designs in the Tactile Graphic Library.
Yes, why not?
So here's the suggestion. I did put it in the chat. You can actually write and make the suggestion to the Tactile Graphics Image Library, tgfeedback@aph.org, and you can make those suggestions. If you have print images for that suggestion, please submit them. And Maya, I would encourage you to do the same. If you have specific labyrinths that you'd like to see in the Tactile Graphic Image Library, that is a great idea.
I will put a collection together, including different widths of paths and different complexities, and send them their way.
They would definitely appreciate it.
I think that's great. I love that. So I really want to encourage you to do that too, Maya. I love that. This is also great. So coming out of Iowa, Beth, you put in the chat window, have you tried this hand under hand along with students? And the reason why that captures my attention as well is, especially for students that might be selective as of what they want to touch, I can see the pairing of trying to do that hand under hand with the sound. You gave one of those PowerPoint slides of adding the sound and asking us to try to follow along, whether in our minds or visually, about what was happening in the labyrinth, depending on what vocal sound you came. And I think that would be a neat multisensory activity as well.
Two other tools that come to mind are the Draftsman, as well as the Tactile Doodle for students to work on creating their own.
Yes.
You could, as a teacher, put the seed of the plus with the 4 dots and then really work toward having them make their own.
Yes, that's brilliant. And also, I'm just thinking of the hand over hand thing with a stick or a stylus to both hold it could work. I'm thinking about doing it with one of my students as a visually impaired person and having them put their finger on top of my finger. And maybe they don't want to touch the paper, but they're okay touching my hand, and just feeling the the kinesthetic experience of walking the pattern without having to touch the paper might be an option too.
I think that what you have shared today, Maya, is the broad range of how to use this, and how it can apply to, whether we're talking about the core curriculum or the expanded core curriculum. I think that there's so many layered uses. And just by seeing what some people have put into the chat box as you were doing demonstrations and speaking, that one person in particular said, that was wonderful. It makes perfect sense for the journey to be a reward. And this person wants to make sure that she shares it with her students. So
we have others that want to share it as music therapists with a tie with music, art therapists.
Yes.
For students who might need that therapeutic treatment as well in healthcare.
And
Yes.
there was someone who had mentioned and said, thank you to you for helping to de-stress her Friday. And I think that we all can probably benefit from that. And so it just in closing, Maia, thank you for sharing your passion and your enthusiasm. I think that it was evident throughout the entire presentation. I think that you made it come alive and you definitely got our imaginations going, which was an extra bonus for me. That can be like an extra objective that we walked away with. So we are thankful that you were with us today.
I'm very thankful and